Dedication. Oh.
What is young adult literature, you may ask? Well, YA Lit can be immature. It seems like a cop out for writing. I think it's pretty useless in schools. It's non academic literature, if you think you can even call it literature. These are different things that I've heard parents and teachers say about young adult lit. Granted, these books are written for a specific audience and a targeted age group, but I've learned that most people really enjoy reading these kinds of books. YAL generally has a young protagonist who is dealing with issues that most young people commonly face or things that people aren't able to talk about. These things include belonging, bullying, future love, drugs, alcohol, death, and things of that sort. But what I've come to know is that YA Lit is anything that a young person is willing to read on their own. It gives this targeted age range something that they can relate to, talk about with their friends, or even turn into a widely known and talked about Netflix show. Okay, so why is teaching YA Lit useful? I mean, I genuinely think that it's useful for a good number of reasons. That first reason is that it's a more modern language and it's easier to understand. That makes me want to read it, and that makes other people want to read it. And the second reason is it can turn non-readers into readers. And I think that's so important to figure out. I've had kids who don't want to read anything, like whatsoever. And I found out like they're interested in cars. So I found a YA book that talks about cars and like a car story, and they end up like reading through it really fast, and then they want more. So it's turning these kids who don't want anything to do with books or reading into people who want to read something about their topic, and it's easy for them to understand. And I think that it's really good literature. I think it captures the good parts of the classics and the way that it's written, but the reader doesn't have to flip through all these beginning chapters to get context and it's like history and setting and plot and characters. Like, it gets woven in throughout the story, and it's kind of, you get the necessary information once you're already hooked into the book and like you don't want to leave this novel. So I think that's really great. I think teaching it is useful because the language allows the reader to live inside the novel, like I was saying. They don't want to come out, they can really relate to the characters. I think that YA Lit has a lot of different themes and different genres that kids can choose from. And there's really something in YA Lit for everyone. Like, it's such a broad and expansive genre, and I think that's what's really great about it. And it talks about the tough topics that kids are facing and that they want to talk about, but like they don't know who they can trust or who they should talk to about. Like suicide and rape and bullying and love. And it just is like, it doesn't glorify what these things are, but it like gives it to the reader in a very real way. It brings the dark topics to light, and I think that's something that our kids need to know. Like, hey, if this happened to you, like, you can come talk to me about it, or you can come talk to someone about it. Like, it doesn't have to be something that you're ashamed of. And so those are just some of the reasons that teaching YA Lit I think is really, really useful and really cool. I think that the history of YA Lit really influences how YA is viewed and written today. It started out as books for readers ages 12 to 18, but now it's expanded from ages 10 up to age 35, which is a lot broader of an age range. I think it's really cool. In the 1960s, the Young Adult Library Services Association wanted to represent the younger 12 to 18-year-olds in novels, just like The Outsiders, and it gave a outlet for contemporary realism for the adolescent kind of ages. After The Road was paid for authors like Judy Blume, Lois Duncan, and Robert Cormier, it hit the scene. It really expanded YA Lit. Once 1980s came around, when teens got bored of the single problem novels, things like horror began to expand and arise. And then the 90s began a crazy renaissance among readers. Okay, so once that this 90s renaissance amongst readers began and the horror genre began to expand, this began to beg the question of, why does paranormal dystopian novels connect with teens so much? Like, it's not realistic, it's not something they can relate to, so like, why are they wanting to read things like that? But what I learned, and what I think the authors have learned, is that it's a bridge from the adult world, from the childhood world, in the same way that the natural is being a bridge to the supernatural world. So it's like this kind of coming of age sort of novel, in a way that's not necessarily coming of age. But it's just like an alternate universe and it relates to a place where kids aren't used to always being. So this led to the progression of shelves on shelves on shelves of different books for teens and that young adults wanted to read. Teens wanted to read them, people in their 20s wanted to read them, and this just began to expand and grow the genre as a whole. Which also begged the thing for dystopian novels, romance novels, horror novels, and even some nonfiction novels as items and things that kids, young adults, ages 10 through 35 could connect with.
Oh, keep it on the low.
Dedication. Oh.
Dramatic nuclear.